Okay, let's talk about multiplying integers. If you've not watched the videos on adding integers or subtracting integers, I would suggest you go do that now so you get a better idea of what we're doing. Because with multiplying integers, we're just going to go right back to what is multiplication. Okay, multiplication is basically repeated addition. Okay, so the concept behind it is it's a short way of writing a lot of addition. Okay, so for instance, if I were to just multiply 3 times 3, okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start using parentheses to represent that. There's different ways we can do this. We used to do it this way, right? The problem is when we start getting into variables, it can get confusing. The other way is to use the dot, which is okay as well, but sometimes it might get confusing because there is a decimal point in math as well, so the dots are a little bit tricky too. So I'm going to mostly be using 3 times 3. I'm using parentheses. When we put our parentheses next to each other, the implied operation is multiplication. So we're implying that we're multiplying. So you might see it like that, or you might see it like this. That is also multiplication, okay, just in parentheses. So 3 times 3, what we're saying is we're adding 3 times. Okay, so it's 3 plus 3 plus 3, right? That's the same as 3 times 3. And 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9, which is also 3 times 3. Because 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so with that in mind, what we're doing is we're applying the same concept to integers. Okay, so for instance, if it was now 3 times negative 3, and again I'm using parentheses because this helps with not only the implied operation of multiplication, but it also tells us, makes it very clear if we're subtracting or multiplying, because if I just put the minus 3 right next to it, it would look like 3 minus 3. But we're saying 3 times negative 3. Well, what does that mean? That means I am adding negative 3 times. Okay, so negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6, and negative 6 plus negative 3 is negative 9, so it equals negative 9. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because you go, well, 3 times negative 3, why is that negative? Because we're adding the negative 3 times. So we've got, when we multiply a positive and a negative, okay, it's going to be a negative integer, okay, or a number if we're dealing with rational numbers, let's say, decimal points, fractions, etc. 3 times negative 3 equals negative 9. Okay, the same is true for negative 3 times 3. Okay, so if we take negative 3 and we multiply it times 3, that too is going to equal negative 9. Okay, now because the simple rule is multiplying a positive and a negative. If you multiply a positive and a negative, okay, we multiply those two together, we're gonna get a negative. Okay, when we multiply a positive and a positive, we get a positive, right? 3 times 3, we did it up there. We're always going to get positive. In this case, it was positive 9. All right, last scenario. What if we multiply 2 negatives? Negative 3 times negative 3. Well, how do you add? This doesn't make sense, like the adding part of it. Well, if you think of the first negative 3 as subtraction, okay, think of it as subtracting negative 3. 3 times. So it's 0 minus -3 minus -3 minus -3. Okay, so we're going to subtract -3 3 times. Well, if you remember our subtraction rule, okay, we can use our keep change change we want, all right? Or we could just remember that subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive, but let's just do our keep change change. So we go plus, plus, we keep this one and we change the minus to a plus and the negative to a positive, plus, plus, and we end up with 3 plus 3 plus 3. Well, that equals 9. So when I multiplied these two negatives, I ended up with a positive. I multiplied a negative times a negative, and I got a positive because I was thinking of it as subtracting -3 3 times. Okay, so that's multiplying integers in a nutshell. So let's take a little more complex thing. What if we did 3 times -3 times +3? Okay, we can do these one at a time. Okay, or we can just look at the fact that there's one negative, which means it's going to change signs once. But let's just do it kind of the way we've been talking about. 3 times -3 we've already established is -9. Okay, so now I've got -9 times +3, and -9 times +3 is -27. Okay, so I ended up with a negative because there was only one negative. Okay, if there's an odd number of negatives, you're going to end up with a negative number. If there's an even number of negatives, for instance, -3 times 3 times -3. Okay, let's just do this. -3 times 3 is -9, right? Because we know we're basically adding -3 3 times. Okay, but now we're left with -9 times -3. Okay, because I brought this down here, see? So -9 times -3, well, we know now that when we multiply two negatives, we get a positive. Okay, because it's the same idea of subtracting. So I'm like subtracting -9 3 times, which is the same as adding a positive. So -3 times -9 equals +27. Okay, so that's the main scenarios that you're going to come across, and that's the basics of multiplying integers. Again, multiplication is repeated addition. Okay, when you and then of course you want to remember that multiplying a positive and a negative results in a negative. Multiplying a positive and a positive results in a positive, and multiplying a negative with a negative results in a positive. So the only time that you end up with a negative is if the signs are opposite. Okay, another way of thinking that. All right,